Welcome back. The City of Johannesburg led a water engagement conversation with the Johannesburg Water and the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce as well as industry earlier this week to discuss water supply issues in the city. The city partnered with the business sector stakeholders in finding solutions to the water supply challenges. Johannesburg Water revealed that the infrastructure is a major concern, with the backlog sitting at around 27 billion rand. Earlier this week, we spoke to the Ward 90, early on, we spoke to Ward 90 councillor about the impact that the water scarcity has had on residents. Let's now bring in Joburg Water's Managing Director, Ntshavheni Mukwevho, and to have this conversation. Ntshavheni, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. I want to start off here with the announcement that was made yesterday around the 2 pumping stations that will be closed off for maintenance. This is now the Rand Water pumping stations, the Akonuf as well as the Zwartkoppies. What sort of impact does that then have on the work that Joburg Water is supposed to provide?
Thank you very much, Adran, and good morning to you and to the viewers as well. Indeed, there is a shutdown that will be happening, which is really necessary for the maintenance that our bulk supplier needs to do. Of course, if you look at the work that will be happening, especially in Ekenhof Pump Station, it will have an impact in terms of the water supply. As you may be aware, the Ekenhof Pump Station supplies over half of the city. So it supplies the entire Greater Soweto, Greater Lenasia, Greater Randburg, and Greater Roodepoort. So indeed, from Friday, the bulk supplier will, as they are doing that maintenance, they'll only be pumping at a rate of about 20% of the normal load until they finish their work that they'll be doing on Monday. But I must indicate this maintenance is quite important because, of course, it is the maintenance that will improve the performance of the infrastructure.
Yeah, and speak to us about the consultation that would have taken place, if any, between the city, Joburg Water, as well as the bulk water supplier. Because the concern that has been raised by some activists and residents, essentially, is that the timing of it is off, considering that it is the festive season. There are events that we know that are taking place during this particular period, and the impact that that could have, and also the risk to people's health.
So the maintenance in the main, of course, there's ongoing consultation between ourselves and the bulk supplier. And if you really follow the bulk supplier in terms of the communication that they've been issuing, they prefer to do their maintenance in the main during winter. Of course, this is when the demand is supposed to be low, as well as during the December holiday. The reason for December holiday is that some of the industries or businesses will have closed, and that becomes a perfect time. Of course, as much as it inconveniences customer, but the impact becomes less than when we are doing that maintenance, possibly during middle of the year when also sector of economy are operating.
Yeah, but what about that health risk that we are speaking about? Earlier on as well, we're speaking to the MEC for health in Gauteng, and she says that this is a concern for her. But they are trying to come up with other measures, especially for hospitals as well.
Yes. So on our side, we have a responsibility, even though maintenance is happening on the bulk supply side. We have a responsibility of engaging with our customers, engaging with our key stakeholders, and hospitals are part of the key stakeholder, both private and public. We engage with them so that we can be able to understand the readiness on their side, and also be able to understand what type of storage facility they have, because each and every hospital, in terms of bylaw, is required to have a storage reservoir in their own premises. And why do we require that? Simply because when we do maintenance like this, it is then that storage facility becomes very handy because it's able to take them through. And of course, in some of the public hospitals, in fact, most of them, including public clinic, we work very closely with the Department of Health, as well as both in COJ, as well as the province, so that we can be able to come on board wherever we are required to facilitate filling of their holding tanks or on-site reservoirs.
Yeah. Are you satisfied with the communication that Joburg Water has done? Because once again, Rand Water, when you speak to them, they say that, listen, we have a client and our client is Joburg Water. and it is Joburg Water that is supposed to be communicating with the residents what will be taking place.
Indeed, we are communicating. I'm sure you have seen that we've started communicating, a few weeks back about this, because normally the bulk supplier notifies us like 21 days before the actual shutdown, and they did that. And from there, we really started putting messages through all form of media platforms. And of course, we are having also various engagement with our ward councillor. And the reason for that, why do we engage with our councillor? Because they do assist us, of course, to push the messages to their communities. Because most of our ward councillors have got their own community groups that they facilitate messages that we want them to send them to the community group. So we are communicating and will carry on communicating throughout, even during the shutdown, so that we can be able to advise the residents around the contingent measure that will have put in place for them to be able to access water.
Yeah, well, one of those ward councillors, Martin Williams, we spoke to him a bit earlier on, the councillor for Ward 90, he actually says that the communication is essentially very bad. It's poor.
Look, we can always improve, of course. We appreciate the feedback, and wherever, of course, we receive some form of criticism, we go back to the drawing board and reflect. But I can assure you that we have really been communicating, and that's why you hear that it's a really discussion going on in various community around this particular shutdown. This discussion is simply happening because we've been communicating and communicating widely.
Okay, and then speaking about the infrastructure backlog and the impact that is having on your duty to provide a service which is an essential service when it comes to water provision. The 27 billion rand, speak to us about that particular figure, how you arrived at that figure, and what could inform this. Is lack of maintenance also one of those? Let me start by really just giving you some numbers so that you can be able, and the viewers be able to appreciate the extent of the infrastructure for the city of Johannesburg in terms of water supply. You're talking about more than 12,500 kilometers of water network, and you're talking about just under 12,000 kilometers of water network. I mean, we always report around the number of reservoirs that we have, which is about 128 with above 1,900 megaliters in terms of the total storage. So with that a massive infrastructure that we have to supply water in the city, so there is, of course, a requirement in terms of the renewal or refurbishment of this infrastructure that need to happen on an ongoing basis. And of course, if you look historically, as the city, we have not been investing at the rate that we should have, if you take into account the extent of infrastructure. We have been investing at a level of about R1 billion per annum, and historically. And if you take into account really this extent of this infrastructure, in terms of renewal, we need to be investing in the region of about R3 billion or so. So the backlog really comes in simply because of that issue of investment. But I can indicate to you that there is a plan to deal with that, and that plan is part of the broader policy for National Treasury, which is looking at the trading services reforms. So this trading services reform basically what's talking about is that metros, because focusing on metros, especially for water, which is the phase one, we need to run the business differently. In other words, as much as water is part of the income that the council gets, the resources that come from water needs to be ring-fenced so that we can be able to reinvest back to the water business. It is for that reason that we have a 10-year plan through that, which will be able to be investing about 32.5 billion as part of the turnaround. Yeah, and where will this money be coming from? Is there any intention to knock on the doors of Treasury?
So the money will come in different forms. I mean, if you look at our financials, of course, you'll be able to see that we have a strong balance sheet, and we can, through the city, be able to raise loan. And of course, the second issue, this trading service reform that I'm talking about, it has some incentives that if the metro that has a turnaround plan or a turnaround strategy that has been approved for water business, and that carries on implementing that turnaround plan correctly, there is incentive that they'll be getting on annual basis, and that incentive will be in the form of a capital budget. The third one, of course, will be our own, as part of this trading service reform. We need to be focusing more on the revenue collection. And we have numbers in terms of how do we need to do that and what is it that we need to be targeting. So as we are focusing on improving the revenue collection, we need to be making sure that those resources as they come in, they go back into investing them into the infrastructure for water. So basically, there's those three sources of funding that we are looking at. But above that, I must indicate as well that we are also looking at other concept of involving private sector. That's why we're also engaging with JCCI. If you look at the area like non-revenue water, we are saying we don't necessarily need to bring our own resources to deal with non-revenue water. We can invite private sector to say, bring your resources, assist us to solve the problem, and we can be able to look at some mechanism of sharing the returns once we start seeing those returns. And an initiative like that, we're working with GTEC, and they're currently in the process of appointing TAs, which are traditional advisors, so that we can look at that. And we're not looking only at non-revenue water only. We're looking also at other mega projects like water reclamation and the plan that we need to put in Lanseria, where we can be able to do it through a triple P model.
Okay. Martin Williams, the ward councillor of Ward 90, also one of the points that he raises is around corruption. Is that a concern for you, MD? And have you picked up any leakages from the coffers where money is disappearing within your entity?
Not that I'm aware of. And 2 days back, we had a session with where we have invited editors of the media houses. We spent 2 hours together, and part of it, I presented the outcome of the audit, which the results were approved by the board end of November. I must clearly indicate that as much as we're aiming to get clean audit, we could not get clean audit. But if you look at the procurement aspects, which is part of the element that gets audited, the procurement aspects, we really got clean audit. There were no material findings around our procurement processes.